To understand the global phenomenon of street food, you have to look at Yaowarat. Bangkok's Chinatown is one of Southeast Asia's most iconic culinary destinations, an intensely dense urban environment shaped by generations of migration and inherited cooking techniques. When urban planners and policymakers look at a district like this, they typically view it through the lens of destination branding. It is treated as a highly effective engine for urban regeneration. Look at the standard quantitative dashboard used to evaluate these neighborhoods. Success is strictly measured by upward trending charts, higher GDP contributions, expanding tourist foot traffic, and overall commercial viability. But relying on these top-line macroeconomic numbers completely obscures the lived reality of the host community. High foot traffic and revenue growth do not equate to a healthy, enduring neighborhood. A 2026 year-long ethnographic study by Mononate Warachananan investigates this exact tension. By spending 12 months embedded in the district, the research captures the localized impacts of global visibility. The findings show that sustaining a heritage foodscape is an ongoing, embodied socio-cultural process. It is lived out in daily routines, not calculated on a balance sheet. To see how this actually works, we have to bypass the economic metrics and examine how tourism alters the underlying mechanics of time, physical space, and social relationships within the district. Because no amount of global branding or commercial profit can ensure a district's survival if the invisible temporal fabric of the community itself collapses. The industry standard assumes that maximizing visitor volume brings universal benefit to local businesses. The reality on the street is severe temporal compression. Traditionally, Yaowarat operated on a predictable daily rhythm, with distinct periods for preparation, service, and rest. Today, algorithm-driven social media exposure triggers massive, unpredictable surges. This fractures that schedule, extending labor deep into the night and shrinking recovery time. For veteran vendors, this creates a complex internal tension. They experience immense cultural pride seeing international travelers seek out their inherited recipes, but the erratic, compressed working hours cause intense physical and emotional exhaustion. The capacity to absorb this acceleration is heavily split across generations. Younger operators can often push through the longer hours, while older vendors find their bodies unable to keep pace with the chaotic new rhythm. The surrounding residents feel this shift as well. Many long-term locals actively reorganize their daily routines, retreating indoors and entirely avoiding their own neighborhood streets during peak evening hours. The push for hypervisibility effectively displaces the most vulnerable members of the community from their own environment, converting the evening street into an exclusive zone for tourists. Planners and policymakers also tend to treat authenticity as a rigid historical artifact, a fragile tradition that must be locked in place and protected from the tourism market. The field data shows that the people actually cooking the food do not view authenticity as a strict set of rules. They treat it as an active daily practice of embodied negotiation. Vendors divide their culinary work into two categories to survive. The outer layer is the surface, packaging and presentation. Vendors willingly adapt these elements to tourist demands. But beneath that is the heart, the core taste profile, recipe lineage, and inherited techniques. This center is fiercely protected. Second and third generation successors frequently embrace surface-level innovations to keep the stall competitive on a global stage, ensuring the business stays afloat. Meanwhile, the senior generation manages the integrity of the food by making ongoing physical corrections on the fly. They continuously adjust the seasoning and refine the cooking techniques right in the middle of a chaotic dinner rush.
When top-down urban policies attempt to codify and freeze a neighborhood's identity into a museum piece, they actively strip the community of the very flexibility required to survive. So if formal, rigid preservation frameworks aren't actually keeping the district's culinary identity alive amid this chaos, how does the culture endure? The answer is informal stewardship. Cultural continuity here relies entirely on unstructured, everyday interactions, rather than archived historical records or formal classroom instruction. Passing down complex culinary knowledge requires deep physical proximity. The lineage of a recipe is transmitted through years of shared observation and physical repetition right at the stall. It is an inherently nonverbal process. Elders guide younger family members through micro-adjustments in their knife work or walk control during peak service, correcting the technique without needing to stop and explain it. This transmission is permanently linked to the broader sensory environment. The specific sounds of the street, the smells of the walks, and familiar neighboring stalls act as anchors for collective memory. This makes the entire system highly vulnerable to market forces. When rising commercial rents force a long-established stall to shut down, the damage extends far past the individual loss of income. The closure of a veteran vendor removes a critical piece of the street's shared sensory environment. Cultural continuity relies on the collective network of the neighborhood, and removing one node damages the whole. To truly measure the health of a heritage district, researchers utilize a different metric entirely: relational well-being. For the people who live and work in Yaowarat, stability isn't calculated by end-of-quarter profit margins. It is mapped spatially through routine predictability, mutual recognition among neighbors, and a localized sense of emotional security. This architectural heat map shows Yaowarat before the global spotlight. Backstreets and narrow alleyways functioned as vital community living rooms. Today, expanding waves of tourist foot traffic bleed into every available corridor, causing severe spatial contraction and consuming those previously quiet corners. This creates an immediate sociological consequence. Residents are physically squeezed out of the resting areas and thoroughfares they require to interact with their neighbors and decompress from the chaotic streets. There are positive interactions. When visitors show genuine, respectful interest in the culinary history of a stall, vendors report feeling validated, which provides a momentary emotional anchor during exhausting shifts. Yet, these individual moments of connection cannot counteract the broader structural reality of intense physical crowding and the erosion of local space. Skyrocketing real estate values and global media attention completely fail to offset the profound emotional cost incurred when a community loses its spatial autonomy. This new model replaces the traditional economic matrix with a three-pillar structure. A functioning framework requires workable temporal rhythms, the protection of embodied stewardship, and spatial autonomy, interlocking to form affective sustainability. Food tourism is not a discrete sector that can be managed in isolation. It is an all-encompassing socio-cultural condition that alters the urban environment at a cellular level. To ethically manage these districts, urban planners must move past superficial destination branding and establish explicit protections for the neighborhood's microspaces of sociality. Policy must safeguard the proximity-based transmission of knowledge by limiting the unchecked commercial displacement that tears local networks apart. A community's true capacity to endure relies entirely on protecting the slow, effective labor that takes place far away from the camera flashes. You cannot claim to sustain an urban heritage foodscape without fiercely protecting the local community's inherent right to their own rhythm and their own space.